Welcome back to FPL Therapy, the weekly podcast hosted by me, FPL Raptor, where each week we are usually joined by a different guest. But for this one, we do have a solo pod ahead of Game Week 18 because it's so close to Christmas. I'm recording this on Monday, the 23rd, ready for your wonderful faces on Tuesday, the 24th on Christmas Eve. And I want to say a massive Merry Christmas to you and your families if you celebrate. And even if you don't celebrate, I hope you have a wonderful few days. And this is also my final episode of 2024. The next one will be at the start of January for Game Week 20. So I also wish you a very happy new year. And I just want to say thank you for all of the support in 2024. I obviously launched this podcast only like 4 or 5 months ago. I didn't know how it would be received, but the support has been absolutely unbelievable. So thank you for the support. And do make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube and rate 5-star on audio. And this podcast does continue to be sponsored by the wonderful people over at Club, which is a free-to-play mobile fantasy football game. I highly recommend checking it out. There'll be a link down below in the description, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So the plan for today, I'll try and keep it short and sweet, although I think you guys like the longer episodes, and I don't know how to keep it short and sweet. But we are going to talk through Game Week 17, some of the key things that stood out, and then sort of discuss the players that I would be targeting for Game Week 18 and 19. And we have 2 deadlines in quick succession, obviously first Boxing Day, and then a few days after that. So we need to be thinking at this time of year about players that are minutes risks and ideally trying to avoid them. But there are so many players that feel like they've got massive upside that are minutes risks. So it's about that balance between risk and also trying to be a little bit safe with some of the players. So we'll discuss all of that, but a little bit of happiness from me, which isn't what FPL Therapy is about. You guys like it and I'm sad, I think, but it was another good game week for me. So 100 points in Game Week 17, which is 1,083 points overall. And somehow I'm up to 185k. Now, I'm not saying that's an incredibly good rank. I know a lot of you watching and listening will have a better rank than that. But what I will say is it's a lot better than I was around Game Week 7 or 8 when I wildcarded. Remember, I started the season without Haaland. I was down at like 3.8 million, and now I'm up at 185k. So it's been an incredibly good run, lots of consecutive greens. I know that will probably come to an end very soon, but I'm also very happy with how the team's set up. And like I said, 100 points in Game Week 17. So let's very briefly go through it, and we'll discuss the players in more detail. But Sanchez finally came in for me with a 9-pointer, and my entire defense actually returned. Gabriel and Trent both got 4-pointers with a single assist, and then Robinson got the clean sheet. He was actually on bonus points until the final seconds of the game. I think he was on 2, and then right at the end, he dropped down to 0. But another good performance from Fulham at the back. So the entire defense and goalkeeper returned, and honestly, that was the position in the team I was least confident this week. The midfield largely stunk it up for me. So Enzo, Saka, and Palmer all blanking. Obviously, we now have a Saka injury to probably deal with, as I'll discuss a little bit later, and we'll go through possible Saka replacements. At the time of me recording, I don't have a definitive update, but it sounds like he could be out for a little while. So we'll discuss that. And obviously, Chelsea failed to score. Salah, 21 points. And don't worry, we're going to talk about that Liverpool Spurs game a little bit later because, I mean, we knew there would be goals in that game, but a 42-pointer with captaincy, that's such a massive swing. First, if you don't own him, that feels like it's almost season-defining. But if you didn't captain him, it also probably didn't deserve that big of a swing. But Mohamed Salah is an absolute joke at the moment. And then my front line was super good as well. I had Isak, Cunha, and João Pedro. Once again, Isak and Cunha doing the business for me, and João Pedro continuing to disappoint. So yeah, the reason for the 100 points is basically really good defensive results, Salah captain, and then Isak with his hat-trick. I will discuss the elephant in the room, which is Morgan Rogers sat on my bench. Enzo versus Rogers for me, if you look at bookies odds, algorithms, eye test, routes to points, data, everything, it looked like basically a 50-50. I am slightly frustrated because on my deadline stream and in my videos, I kept saying this is a perfect game for Morgan Rogers. It's perfect. It's transition-based. He obviously wants to prove a point against Man City. City are defending really poorly. I gave so many good reasons to start Rogers in my team. And then I gave loads of negative reasons to not have Enzo in the team. He might play a little bit deeper in the absence of Lavia. We know how good Everton are, but for some reason, I wanted to trust the Chelsea attack more than the Villa attack. And I did think that there was a chance that this might be the game that City turn it around, but they continue to look so bad. So I actually think I don't like bench points. I'd ideally not have 14 points from Rogers sat on the bench, but I also don't get overly stressed about it. All this tells me is that I have a really good squad. I've got someone sat there that didn't get into my starting 11 with 14 points. It means I'm probably in a good position moving forward. And actually, Aston Villa have some good fixtures coming up as well. So yeah, that was the team. 100 points. If I'd have started Rogers over Enzo, it'd be 111. So definitely a good week overall. I'd love to know down below in the comments, how many points did you manage for Game Week 17? And so, yeah, let's go through the games one by one. I'll tell you what stood out via the eye test because I watched at least the extended highlights for every game. And I think I watched 4 or 5 games in full this weekend. And I'll also go through some of the underlying data and teams and players that stand out. Just a couple of macro points before we move into going through the games. The first is the away teams absolutely smashed it this week. So there were only 8 goals scored by the home teams this week, and 6 of the away teams, 6 of them, kept clean sheets. So yes, a lot of the away teams this week were just stronger, and you would expect them to do well, but this goes to show that home advantage isn't always the case. If a better team is playing and they're away, you still probably do back the better team. I think it is also quite a rare occurrence where you only get one of the teams winning at home. And of course, that one team was Aston Villa, who we'll discuss in a second, and it was a very big win for them as well. Another macro point, and a question that I had from one of the viewers, was there was actually only 1 penalty awarded this week. So someone said, are we putting too much emphasis on targeting penalty takers? We can discuss this throughout when we talk about the penalty takers like Kluivert, because Kluivert doesn't carry much threat from open play, but he's on penalties. How much value do we give that? João Pedro has been really rubbish recently, but he's on penalties. Again, how much value do we give that? But I did look into the data, as I always do. And this season, we've averaged 2.12 penalties per game week. Last season, it was 2.82. And the season before that, it was 2.6. I'm not going back much further because obviously we've had the implementation of VAR. And I think that does massively influence the way that penalties are given and how often they are. But basically, yes, we are having fewer penalties, but not by much. It's not even a penalty per game week difference to what we saw last season. But what this does show is, yeah, you're not going to get that many penalties. We're getting 2 per game week. But if you can own 7 or 8 penalty takers in your team, you're basically getting close to owning half of the penalty takers in the Premier League. So there is a good chance that you will pick up penalties. Obviously, you are also missing half the penalty takers in the league as well. So it might be that you get unlucky. Like, I've got lots of penalty takers in my team, but I don't think anyway. Let me remind myself, I don't think any of them got a penalty this week. So that's just the way it is. But yeah, those are 2 macro points to look at, is don't always just trust the home fixtures. And also we'll discuss throughout whether penalty takers are still worth targeting. Let's go with the first game then. Aston Villa 2, Man City 1. This was absolutely the Morgan Rogers show. And again, on my bench and on a lot of people's benches as well. To give you some stats, he was sold by over 400,000 managers in Game Week 17. He was the 3rd most bench player and the 4th most transferred out player. So don't feel bad if you sold him. Don't feel bad if you benched him. A lot of people did that. My girlfriend, who is sat behind the camera and is not coming on FPL Therapy today, she started Morgan Rogers. She is an Aston Villa fan, and she was feeling very smug about that. And I don't blame her, because not many people did start Morgan Rogers. I will say, he's now at a point, obviously, with a goal and assist, it helps, but he's got 5 goals, 3 assists this season. He's looking at a return every 2 games. He does continue to offer really decent value. And as I said, Gian and I spoke in the previous episode about how it will suit him, that game. And I actually look ahead to next week against Newcastle. It's another game where it's probably likely to be quite transition-based. And it's another game where I could see Morgan Rogers doing fairly well. I feel like he just exploited Man City's vulnerabilities. He actually had 0.93 XGI, which is the highest he has accumulated in a single game week. He was involved in 2 big chances, had 4 shots in the box. If you watch the game, you would have had the feeling, and I'm not saying the data backs up, but you would have had the feeling that he could have had more. He hit the post from inside the box. There was a chance that he cut back to Ollie Watkins, and Ollie Watkins really should have scored. He could have come away with like 3 or 4 returns in this game. And actually, a lot of Morgan Rogers' points this season have come when we're least expecting it. He's a bit of a big game player. And again, in games where Aston Villa do have to sit back a little bit and they can catch teams on the counter, Morgan Rogers is so effective in that role. So yeah, I can't say enough positive things about him. This doesn't suddenly change my opinion on him. I still don't think he is top 3 cheap asset for me. I would still put Sarr, Ahmad, and Enzo ahead of Morgan Rogers. But it also does go to show that you don't necessarily need to rush these cheap assets out your team. We'll discuss Semenyo a little bit later. In the week that lots of people moved from Semenyo and Rogers to Ahmad blanks, Rogers monster hauls, and Semenyo finally gets his attacking return. So maybe the best strategy moving forward, and I'm not saying it definitely is, but maybe there is some element of just saying, do we just hold on to our cheap assets and maybe not move them in and out and just hope that every few weeks they tick along with an attacking return? Or maybe you do decide to get super aggressive. When we move on to my team, I'll discuss the possibility in my own team of potentially moving around those cheap assets. The only other thing to mention, I guess, well, 2 things from an Aston Villa perspective was firstly, Duran started his 3rd game in a row for Aston Villa. His minutes haven't been perfect, but in this game, he played 80 minutes. So they're definitely improving, and he looks like the first choice option right now. How can Emery drop a man that is scoring in every game that he starts? And especially when Watkins comes straight off the bench and misses a big chance. And I'm not saying Duran hasn't missed big chances, but Duran is not only an excellent goal scorer. I don't know if you watched the press conference, not in the previous game, but I think it was for game week 16. Emery spoke about what he likes about Duran now is that Duran is finally understanding the other stuff in in addition to scoring goals, because we know Duran is a fantastic goal scorer, but he doesn't press as well as Ollie Watkins. His link-up play hasn't been as good. He doesn't run the channels as well. But in recent weeks, he's started to add a lot of that more to his game. And I think that is why Emery is happy to start Duran now, because he doesn't feel like he's losing out on all of the other stuff that Ollie Watkins provides. The issue is, I can't sit here right now and say that I am confident Duran starts the next 3 or 4 games. In fact, I would be massively surprised if Duran isn't benched in one of the next 4 games. I'm pretty sure Watkins will start at least 1. He could even start potentially 2 of them. But do you need Duran to start every game when he's an absolute monster off the bench? He's scoring when he starts and he's only 5.8 million. He had 2 big chances in this game against City. He's actually not a bad punt. But for me, over this busy period when we've got a midweek deadline on Boxing Day, I would like to own an asset that I know will start every game. So I'm probably not going to look to Duran, but at that price below 6 million, I'm not necessarily sure that I see many more options that have as much upside as he does. And the fixtures actually start to improve for Aston Villa from about game week 19, 20 onwards. So yeah, I've got absolutely no issue with Duran. I just don't like the minutes risk myself. The other player for Aston Villa that really stood out was Tielemans. And this is more from a footballing perspective, but he played that number 10 role so incredibly well. I would say he was my man of the match. I would argue he was even better than Morgan Rogers, which is saying something. Tielemans absolutely ran the show. And I would say that he is probably top 5 footballers in the Premier League in terms of having an eye for a pass and being able to execute that pass as well. He was just remarkably good. I hope for Aston Villa's sake, and also for Morgan Rogers, who I think is better off the left, that Tielemans does continue in that number 10 role. The only other option they've got is they put McGinn there. I don't think McGinn is a particularly good 10. I think he's better out wide. And I think the same for Morgan Rogers as well. You might think, no, I want Morgan Rogers central. But I think in this game, he showed that he does a lot of his best work off the left. So I think if Aston Villa continue with Tielemans in the 10, it will only benefit their entire team overall with Duran and also Morgan Rogers. On Man City, I just can't wrap my head around how bad they are right now. And I don't think anyone can. And no one really knows a specific thing that is causing it. And I guess Pep Guardiola has commented on this. It isn't a specific thing that's causing it, right? If there was one thing that's caught, and it's not just Rodri or just this or just that, because if it was, well, Pep Guardiola would change one thing and they'd suddenly be good again. He's said there are numerous things that we're just not doing quite as well and are causing this poor run of form. I don't know when this is going to turn around. The issue that we've got with City is the fixtures are absolutely remarkably good. Over the next 4, they've got Everton, Leicester, West Ham, Brentford, Ipswich, right? It is a ridiculous run of games over the next 5 weeks. Can you sell your Man City assets before then? It's very difficult. I think if you've got Erling Haaland, he's got to go. I still believe that, even with the fixtures, because do you feel comfortable captaining Haaland at the moment? No. And you can't not captain an asset who's down at 14.8 million. But that is too much money to spend, especially when someone like Alexander Isak is absolutely smashing it. Like, how can you justify spending that much money on Haaland if you're not going to give him the armband? And if you are going to give him the armband, that means you are betting against Mohamed Salah, who we'll discuss later, is on for a record-breaking season in FPL and has just got 21 points in 1 game week. So I just don't foresee a world in which keeping Haaland makes sense. With the other City assets, there might be some potential because a lot of other people won't be going there. So that is often the best time to invest in these assets. I look at Guardiola. If I didn't own a Liverpool or an Arsenal defender, let's say you don't have Gabriel or you don't have Trent and you're sat there with Guardiola, it does become very, very difficult to hang on to him. Because yes, he's got a lot of attacking threat, but he's not playing for a good defense. And he's also playing centre-back at the moment because Ruben Dias is out injured. Akanji can't stay fit on a consistent basis. Stones went off injured at halftime. Ake's struggling for fitness. They don't have the centre-back. So Gvardiol is playing a very deep role. I say that. He had another bloody big chance after scoring 4 goals already this season. He had another big chance in game week 17. So he does still have a really decent amount of attacking threat, but he's not playing in that advanced sort of left wing back, left wing role that you would really ideally want him. I think Gvardiol is an absolutely fine hold, but I do understand if you don't have Gabriel or Trent, who for me are the best 2 defenders in the game, then I would probably want to bring them in ahead of him. So it's one of those, I feel like if you've got the luxury transfers to make the move, maybe you do it. The other player to discuss is probably Phil Foden. We'll discuss Bukayo Saka replacements in a separate section at the end of the podcast, but with Saka probably being out, at least at the time we're recording, it looks very likely. I do think a lot of people will be looking to Phil Foden. There are other options, and the thing is, Man City just aren't in a particularly good run of form, are they? And whilst Phil Foden obviously finally gets the goal, and by the way, that was his first goal this season with his 30th shot, he's not in a very good run of form himself. Is Phil Foden going to start the next 3 games in a row for City? I don't know that, right? KDB got his rest at the weekend as well. So I just think with the minutes, with the form of City, I don't know that I can fully justify going for Phil Foden over some of those more nailed assets, but he has such a high ceiling. We saw last season, 2 20-pointers. It's absolutely massive. So, yeah, there is the potential to go there. He will have really high ceiling. And if he does start the next 3 games, or 2 of the next 3 and gets good minutes off the bench, he might outscore all of the assets that start 3. But I don't feel comfortable enough for me. You'll notice I'm very reserved and safe when it comes to sort of minutes risk around Christmas. And therefore, I'm probably going to avoid City assets altogether. I do have Rico Lewis in my starting 11 at the moment, but that's more so because I haven't had an opportunity to remove him yet. So yeah, definitely some interest in the Aston Villa assets if they continue to look good. City, for me, is probably a no-go right now. Right, moving on to the next game, we have Brentford 0, Nottingham Forest 2. I didn't know how this game would go. I've actually noted down here that it was the unstoppable force meets the immovable object, right? We've got one of the best defences in the league in Nottingham Forest against one of the best attacks in the league in Brentford. And it went the way that I kind of maybe expected it to go, given that Forest are just so elite. So if we go through some of their data, last season they were 4th for non-penalty expected goals conceded. This season they are 3rd for non-penalty expected goals conceded. So we are talking about over 2 seasons now, a top 4 defence in the Premier League. It's absolutely outstanding. So this just goes to show if you've got a fixture against Nottingham Forest, I know they can concede goals. They conceded 3 to Newcastle. I think it was 3 to Arsenal as well. Yes, they can concede goals, but it's definitely not a good fixture. And Spurs play against Forest on Boxing Day. It's one of the things putting me off bringing in a Spurs asset, because as good as Spurs are going forward, Forest always really impress me. On Brentford, I do agree that they are better at home, but I think this is being blown slightly out of proportion. I did put a tweet out about this, and Brentford fans really weren't very happy. Of course, they are top of the table this season if you look at their home form. But listen to the teams they've played at home. Palace, Southampton, West Ham, Wolves, Ipswich, Bournemouth, Leicester, Newcastle. There are some difficult games in there. Palace isn't easy, but it was at the start of the season when they were in terrible form. Newcastle is not a particularly easy fixture. Bournemouth isn't an easy fixture. But there's no really tough ones in there. Away from home, they've played Liverpool, Man City, Spurs, United, Fulham, Everton, Villa, Chelsea. So basically at home, they've played all of the best defence, or the worst defence is the best fixtures. And away from home, they've played all of the toughest. So I feel like the fixtures are really important here, and you need to take into account the context. Are Brentford better at home? Yes, very clearly. But I don't think the gap is as large as it looks. I think it is based on the fixtures that they've played. But they will continue to score goals. The way that Thomas Frank sets them up, Mbeumo is still a fine option. Wissa is still a fine option as well. But with the fixtures that they've got, I also don't think I'd be desperately looking to bring them in. And if you had a free transfer to move them out, I wouldn't mind that either. Like they're still towards the bottom of the fixture ticker. They've got Brighton, Arsenal. The Southampton game is pretty good, but then it's Man City, Liverpool, Palace. I really don't like the fixtures overall for Brentford. So I wouldn't mind, again, if you've got a transfer to use, moving them out. I think Ole Einar obviously stole the headlines, gets the goal and the clean sheet. I still think I prefer Milenkovic for the saving. Milenkovic is a monster from set pieces. His underlying goal threat is much higher than Ole Einar. If you're wondering why Ole Einar was getting forward so much, you might have watched the highlights and been like, why is he getting forward so much? It was actually really interesting. So Forest matched Brentford's formation in terms of going for a 3 or a 5 at the back. So Forest normally play a 4 at the back, almost like a 4-2-3-1 formation. But in this game, they matched it. So they played with 3 centre-backs, and that meant that Nico Williams and Ole Einar were playing as wing-backs. I don't think they'll continue that on a consistent basis. If they were to, for whatever reason, Ole Einar would be unbelievable at right wing-back. He was getting forward so much. But I expect them to revert back to the back 4 from now on. And I still think that I would prefer Milenkovic for the save-in. Would I bring in a Forest defender right now? Probably not. I look at it and I just think, the fixtures they're like a mixed bag, but do I expect many clean sheets for Forest? Not particularly. So it's Spurs, Everton. The Everton game is good, of course. Wolves under new management. They scored 3 goals this week, so maybe not. Liverpool, the Southampton game's good, and then they play Bournemouth away. I see maybe 2 clean sheets in there. So I think if you can rotate your Forest defender in and out, then absolutely I'd consider it. But if you needed to start them every week, I don't think I'd be looking at a Nottingham Forest defender. I think that's mainly it. Obviously, very unlucky if you own Wood or Mbeumo. They were both involved in a big chance. Chris Wood in particular had a massive header, which he just completely fluffed these lines. So the keeper was coming across the goal and he had like a really big gap to head it into, and he headed it back towards the keeper. So that was a big chance missed for Chris Wood. You'd expect him to score that. And then Mbeumo set up, I can't remember who it was on the edge of the box or just on the sort of penalty spot. He really should have come away with an assist in that game at the very least. They are both penalty takers. They're both still getting good minutes. I would have no issue keeping Wood and Mbeumo. But like I said, with the fixtures that Brentford have coming up, if you need to free up the funds, as I did a couple of weeks ago, I don't mind the idea of selling an Mbeumo for someone like Ismail Assar or Amad Diallo. I think that's it basically on Brentford versus Forest, but 2 very good teams. I expect Forest in particular to continue. They are showing no signs of slowing down. Their defensive data is brilliant. Chris Wood is in great goal-scoring form. they're probably going to finish top half of the table, which is crazy because a lot of people had them as likely to be relegated, and they have completely gone against that this season. The next game was very interesting. Ipswich 0, Newcastle 4. That's 2 games in a row as a 4-0 now. They are playing so well at the moment. Again, take into account the fixtures. They have just played Leicester and Ipswich, who are statistically 2 of the 3 worst defences in the league. So they're not a good defence, and you would expect Newcastle to put goals past them, but Newcastle are just flowing a little bit more. The team looks like it did a couple of seasons ago now when Eddie Howe absolutely smashed it. They're just starting to click. In defense and in attack, they just look a lot better. That's something that the data might not necessarily show up with, but when you watch them, it feels very free-flowing. Anthony Gordon was back on the left as well. Anthony Gordon on the left is an exceptional FP option. Like, I love him on the left. On the right, he's still fine. He still takes set pieces. He'll still cross the ball and have a high expected assist. But off the left, he's an absolute monster of an FPL asset at his price. I really like Anthony Gordon. I think he's going massively under the radar. Obviously, if you've already got Isak and you don't want to double up, then that's fair enough. But I really like him. On Alexander Isak, he's absolutely sensational. I can't say enough good things about this man. He now has 10 goals and 4 assists this season, including 8 returns in his last 4 games. He's averaging 2 returns a game over the last 4. Yes, he's had the fixtures, but that's still absolutely ridiculous. He's also racked up 17 bonus points this season. Do you know why he's racking up bonus points? It's similar to Cunha. Because he's so creative. His pass completion's also very high. He very rarely misses the target. And you get an additional bonus point now if you get a shot on target. He wins a lot of fouls. Alexander Isak, the actions that he takes on the pitch, it just makes him a really good FPL asset for bonus points. So I expect him to continue. If you want a comparison point, this is no disrespect to him, and we'll discuss it later. Solanke has 3 bonus points from 11 returns. So Isak only has 3 more returns, but he has 14 more bonus points. So not only is he on penalties, not only has he got great underlying data, not only has he passed the eye test, not only is he an exceptionally gifted footballer, but he's also got those bonus points as well to go with the attacking return. So I just think Alexander Isak for me is close to essential. I would put him as the 3rd best, probably the 3rd best asset in the game taken into account price. I think you could even make an argument, and I don't want to be too outlandish with this claim, Isak might be the best asset in FPL taken into account the value. Because obviously salary is a joke, but salary is also like 5 million more. I think Isak is right up there. So I would really be considering like -4s to bring him in, even if it involves selling someone like Jackson. I just think Isak is better than anyone else in that forward line by some distance. I love the man. So yeah, really, really insane. Lewis Hall, 22 points in 2 weeks. This feels a little bit frustrating because you always knew the upside was there for Leicester and Ipswich, but I just didn't really have the option to take a punt on the defence. I do feel like you have slightly missed the entry point for Newcastle defenders. And the reason that I say that is Aston Villa, United, Spurs in the next 3, they're not great for defenders. And then after that, they're playing against a Wolves team under new management. Then it's Bournemouth. Then it's Southampton. So I almost feel like if you've not already bought Lewis Hall, is now the best time to do it after you've missed the Leicester and Ipswich games. I'm less sure. That doesn't mean that I don't expect him to do well. I just think there might be other defenders that are about to go into a nicer fixture run that you might want to consider instead. But I do really like him. The only small concern with Lewis Hall, and I will say it's an extremely small concern, is that Botman is back very soon. He's already played a game for the under-21s. And if Botman goes back into centre-back, which you'd imagine, it will be Scherer and Botman as the centre-backs. And Dan Burn can play left-back in some games, especially if they feel like it's a really decent attack or a really tall team that are good in the air. You might see Dan Burn at left-back. I think the chance of that happening is extremely low because Lewis Hall has been so good. How can you drop the man, right? He's looking at potentially even getting a starting spot in the England team. He's playing that well at left-back. So I don't think you can drop him, but I will just say it's always a possibility. And Eddie Howe does love Dan Burn. So assuming that Botman gets back in, there needs to be a spot for Dan Burn somewhere, at least on a semi-consistent basis. So that would be the only small concern. And yeah, like I said, Anthony Gordon is a really good shout. The only other one, and maybe I'll discuss in a bit more detail with the Saka replacement section later, is actually Murphy. 4.9 million. His underlying data is so strong. He's been getting good minutes over the last few. I do just have a concern. Like the front 3 could very easily be Gordon, Isak, Barnes, or Gordon, Isak, and Joelinton. We've seen that a lot in recent weeks and months. Gordon's not nailed on. Sorry, Murphy's not nailed on. We know that 2 of the spots are for Isak and Gordon, and Joelinton plays that role so well. And Barnes, he's very, very good off the bench, but can he sit on the bench every week? I don't think so. So I think Murphy is very much first choice at the moment, but how long that lasts, we've never seen him get a consistently good run of games. And even when he does start, he's not getting 90 minutes on a consistent basis. At 4.9 million, you might not need him to get that, but there is just a concern that I would probably just rather go for someone that's more nailed on, like Ahmad or Enzo. So yeah, lots to consider with Newcastle. For me, Alexander Isak should be top of the priority list. Moving on to West Ham Brighton. This was another game that Brighton were just really disappointing, but they did accumulate 4 big chances and had over 0.7 XG more than West Ham, especially towards the end of the game. You would probably imagine if you are a Brighton fan, you probably felt like you did enough to win that game, or at least created enough chances to score more goals. They really missed Danny Welbeck, not only in terms of chance creation, but also in terms of taking the chances as well. No one else in that team is a prolific finisher. Evan Ferguson is very clearly out of favour. Danny Welbeck is such a massive miss. Now, do I think that João Pedro is out of form right now? Yes, the last 3 games, I don't think he's been particularly good. But I also don't think Brighton have been very good. And I think that massively impacts an asset. They can be playing well and have the ability, but they need the entire team to be fully functioning. And right now, Brighton just aren't quite at it. Something which I just can't wrap my head around is I feel like everyone that watches João Pedro knows that he is not a number 9 and that he does not play well as the number 9, but he continues to play as the number 9. And you might say he played more as a number 10 here with Jorginho Ruta pushing on, and obviously Ferguson came off the bench. But he's still not got that real number 9. Surely Ferguson can't be that bad in training that Hertz doesn't just want to give him a go as the 9. Because João Pedro is the 10, playing off the forward, doing little 1-2s, arriving late in the box. I can promise you, Hurstler, if you're listening, and I know Hurstler obviously loves the podcast, if you're listening, just start João Pedro as the 10. It's so painful to watch him try and operate as the 9 because it's just not what his skill set is. He doesn't play well with his back to goal in the box. He plays well arriving in the box and linking up as well. He plays well with that freedom to drop a little bit deeper if he wants to. So yes, I don't think João Pedro is in good form, but I also think it's Brighton, and I think it's the lack of number 9 for him to play off. The concern is, as of me recording this podcast, I did just look, and the latest news is that Welbeck's still not going to be back for GameWeek 18. So without Welbeck there, without Ferguson being in favour, it looks like he could continue as the 9, which I don't love. I'm going to give João Pedro the Brentford game because it's Brentford at home. We know that Brentford aren't a great defence, and I have other issues to sort in my team. If I was in a luxury position where I had 3 or 4 free transfers, I was selling Saka and had the money to do João Pedro to Isak. João Pedro to Isak is about the easiest transfer you'll ever make. I'm not saying it would definitely pay off this week, but it's about the easiest transfer you'll be able to make in FPL. It's such an upgrade. But for me, that someone that already owns Isak, I'm probably just going to keep faith with João Pedro for at least 1 more week. But I agree, for everyone that's been commenting over the last few weeks, yes, he might be an issue, and he has been a little bit disappointing. West Ham are starting to pick up some decent results, which is great for them. Like, they absolutely need it. But you would still say their overall performances are lacking quite a bit. They still don't have that cutting edge. They still don't play exciting football. And West Ham fans are still really disappointed with the way that they're playing. Even like a 1-1 result draw against Brighton, you'd expect there to be some decent positive vibes coming from West Ham fans. They still were just complaining about the style of football and about the fact that they don't really see what West Ham have improved under Lopetegui. And I would admit that. Like, if you watch them, what has improved since he's come in? Like, they don't have a real style of play or philosophy. It just seems a bit all over the place. Now, they've got a great fixture this week. Southampton away. If you've got Kudus, if you've got Bowen, you keep them, you start them, and you expect them to go absolutely massive. But you're not buying them because after Southampton, it's Liverpool, City, Fulham, Palace, Villa, Chelsea. That is an awful run of fixtures for a team that still aren't really doing it for me. I do think that both Jared Bowen and Kudus have looked really good recently. And again, I expect them to do very well against Southampton. But we are at a point of the season now where you can't take 1 week punts. Like, you've really got to think about your transfers as being so valuable. Yes, you can bring in rotation risks if you want to, but not players that are about to go into a tricky fixture run. Because in a couple of weeks, you're going to be sat there when they've got Liverpool and City and Fulham and thinking, why did I bring in them? So if you've not got a West Ham asset, I wouldn't go there now. But if you do, expect some big scores this week against Southampton. The next game was Palace 1, Arsenal 5. Lots of goals between Palace and Arsenal in the space for about 4 days. Lots to discuss because Arsenal assets are always high in demand. They've got Ipswich at home this week. And also Palace assets. Now they're going into that nice fixture run. They are absolutely in demand too. So what I would say about Arsenal, they've been very defensively solid for a while now under Arteta. And I think Arteta does sacrifice some attacking output for defensive solidity. And that's fair enough to say. And I don't think that's a bad thing. Some people talk about Arsenal's defensive solidity as a bad thing. Like they park the bus. They don't do that. Does Arteta have a more conservative philosophy? Yes. But it means that they don't concede many goals. We see that on a consistent basis. But in this game, it felt like he did sacrifice a bit of that defensive solidity for a bit more attacking output. Remember, there were 3 games in a row before the Palace game where they didn't have a single goal from open play. Arteta probably looked at that and thought, that can't continue. So what he did is he played a midfield three of Havertz, Ødegaard, and Partey. So Partey was sitting, and Ødegaard and Havertz were the 8s. And then obviously Gabriel Jesus was the number 9. I think he did this for a couple of reasons. Declan Rice clearly wasn't fit enough to play 90. Jesus is in a great run of form, so he could play as the 9, which freed up a spot for Havertz as the left 8. Do I expect that to continue? Probably not, because Declan Rice will come back in. I don't think they're as good with Rice as the 6. I prefer Rice as the 8, which then means that it will be one of Havertz or Jesus as the 9. And again, I think they go to a more sort of solid defensive strategy. And again, that's not an issue and it's not a criticism. But in this game, they were definitely more attacking. If it does continue, where it's Havertz and Ødegaard in the midfield with Rice as the 6, then they're going to continue to score a lot of goals. And maybe the attackers are the one we want to own. And actually, if you look at Arsenal's fixtures coming up, they're better for the attackers than the defenders. Ipswich at home, Brentford away, Brighton away, Spurs at home, Villa at home, Wolves away. I don't think they're great clean sheet fixtures, but I definitely want a piece of their attack. So you'd immediately say Saka's a great option. But of course, Saka did go off with his injury in the 23rd minute or the 24th minute. So if you missed it, he whipped in across with his right foot. And when I say his hand shot up, as soon as he kicked the ball, his hand shot up and he waved at the bench. And it was his hamstring. And you can see him clutching his hamstring. I don't want to read too much into facial expressions, right? That isn't my forte, but you could tell by the look on his face that it wasn't just a bit of tightness. There was a bit of worry, and it was the look that Mason Mount had recently, where it's just like the player knows that they've done something quite bad there. And he was obviously seen leaving the pitch on crutches as well, with very limited mobility. And Arteta said that he's really worried about the injury. He said he felt something in his hamstring, he's quite worried. I think by all accounts, considering it's his hamstring, and more importantly, considering it's a re-aggravation of a previous injury, remember he's already been out for a few weeks this season with his hamstring, I would be super surprised if Saka isn't out for at least 3 weeks. At the time of recording, I don't know. I think it could be as many as sort of 6 to 8, but we'll have to wait and see. Let's maybe wait for an update. I don't think we'll get one, because firstly, it's Arteta, and secondly, because Arsenal play after Boxing Day, I think it's on the 27th, we probably won't even get a press conference from Arteta anyway. So I think you are probably safe to sell Saka, but I don't want to fully commit to that just in case he somehow makes a miraculous recovery, but it's not looking good for him. In terms of replacements, we are going to have a section at the end of the video where we look at replacements in more detail. There's going to be an entire section where we focus purely on Saka replacements, but Ødegaard absolutely could become an option, right? He's going to be the same asset in terms of creativity, but he's now going to have probably penalties and in-swinging corners. So I think he'll take corners from the right-hand side, in-swinging with the left foot in the absence of Saka. And I don't see why he wouldn't take penalties, because he's been second-choice penalty taker. In fact, already once this season, Saka has given Ødegaard a penalty. So yeah, you've now got an asset that has decent underlying data, very good minutes, still playing in a good attack with penalties and corners. The only issue with Ødegaard is that I feel like Saka being out just massively reduces the attacking appeal for Arsenal. Like, you still expect them to score goals. They scored 3 goals in the absence of Saka against Palace. But overall, I just don't expect them to tick as well without Saka on that right wing. And a lot of Ødegaard's good play does come from the link up with Bukayo Saka. So yeah, I think he's great, but I'm a little bit put off by just not knowing what they're going to be without Saka in the team. Obviously, after his hat-trick against Crystal Palace, Jesus then starts again and gets another 2 goals. 5 goals in 2 games against Palace is absolutely remarkable. He was honestly excellent in both games, not just with the goals. The way he took the goals was great, firstly, but also his overall play. He linked up the play really well. He was running the channels. He looked strong. He looked fit. And it is just a confidence thing. Like, nobody will doubt Jesus' talent. We know that he's not a prolific goal scorer, but we've seen, I think at Man City, I don't know if you guys remember this, he scored like 25 points in 1 week as a forward. He had like 4 or 5 goals and an assist. Like, Jesus has explosive ability. He's a talented player. He just needs that confidence, and he needs the minutes. And maybe Saka being out might improve Jesus' minutes, because we've seen him this season actually play on the right wing at points. So I think Jesus starts as the 9 against Ipswich. Arteta actually said, let me find the quote. Do I have it here? He said that basically you can't bench a player in that level of momentum. So he's still got the momentum. He's just got another couple of goals. How can Arteta bench a man that's got 5 goals in 2 games? I don't think he can. And I don't think he wants to desperately move Jesus out to the right wing straight away. So I probably do expect Jesus to start as the 9 against Ipswich. And then after that, yeah, he might be moved out to the right, but he's still playing then for Arsenal in an attacking role for a very cheap price at 6.7 million. So I might have gone up to 6.8 now, but yeah, he's a really decent shout. The only concern is there is absolutely a world in which Arsenal set up their attack where Jesus isn't in it. I'll tell you how that happens. Partey is the 6, Ødegaard and Rice as the 8s. You have Havertz as the 9, and Trossard and Martinelli as the wingers. You even have Sterling once he's fit and available as well. So there is absolutely a possible setup, and it probably works quite well, where Jesus isn't in it. So all I think you need is one game from Jesus where he's not quite at it, or you need him to just need a bit of a rest, or he's also on 4 yellow cards. So he's 1 yellow card away from a suspension. If he gets that suspension, comes out of the team, maybe the team play really well without him. Does he get straight back into the team? There are a lot of doubts around him, but if you want to take a punt, I do think he starts the Ipswich game, and it's looking like a great fixture. And like I said, he's clearly in a great run of form as well. So something to consider, but I am thinking about him. I'll talk about my team at the end, but it does feel like a very spicy punt against Ipswich at home for the Boxing Day fixtures. Gabriel had an assist and missed an absolute sitter really from 3 yards out. The ball was slightly above him, but it's just the sort of thing you expect Gabriel to score. He could have been coming away with another goal and assist in a single game. The assist was very lucky, but he's always in the box. He makes a nuisance of himself. He's fantastic in the air. Arsenal are the best defence in the league for me. They are better than Liverpool. You can see that in the data in recent weeks. Gabriel is the best defender in the game. I would say by some distance, but I think Trent is also very good. But Gabriel and Trent for me are so clear. Like, what more do you want from a defender? Insane goal threat, always plays, very rarely gets booked, by the way. I know he got booked in this game, but I think he's only on like 2 yellow cards. He's been pretty good for bonus points recently. I just think Gabriel for me would be top priority ahead of Trent if you're looking to bring in a defender right now. I think he's that good. So yeah, that's it on Arsenal. I'm very interested. I know Martinelli will be on a lot of people's minds. Again, we'll discuss that at the end in the Saka Replacements section. It's a similar thing to Jesus. Like, as long as his minutes are good, he's great. But could they play a situation where Trossard's on the left and Jesus is on the right? They could do. So, I don't know. I just feel like Ødegaard is probably the safest Arsenal bet. Like, if you can bring him in, he just feels very safe for minutes, probably on penalties and set pieces. On Crystal Palace, lots to talk about and lots of players to consider. So, Ismaila Sarr and Mateta in particular are very interesting to me. Obviously, Eze did miss out with what I think was called a small leg injury, whatever that means. So, he obviously missed out, but you would expect him to come back very, very soon. Both players had big chances in this game, Sarr and Mateta, and I think their minutes will continue to be relatively good as well. We know that Nketiah is their weight, and we know that Kamada can play in Ismaila Sarr's role as well, but neither of them have been particularly good when I've watched them play, and I just think Sarr, Eze, and Mateta is definitely the first choice front three. I think the big one for me is Ismaila Sarr, only 5.7 million. He played another 90 minutes. Please watch his goal if you haven't, by the way. He took his goal exceptionally well. He bent it round Saliba. Raya had no chance. He's in form. The underlying data is exceptional, by the way. He's sat at about a 0.6 XGI per 90. And he's the most nailed Palace attacker. And they're going into that insane fixture run. Obviously, Bournemouth isn't the easiest this week. But after Bournemouth, it's... Where are their fixtures? Crystal Palace. They've got Southampton, Chelsea, Leicester, West Ham, Brentford, with 3 of those 5 being at home. I really like a punt on site. In fact, if I was to say my favourite cheap midfielder, it is probably Sarr ahead of Ahmad. I think he's that good. It's not just driven by the goal. I said this recently as well. Once he got through that Arsenal game, and he scored in it anyway, Ismaila Sarr would shoot straight to the top of my list in terms of cheap midfielders. I actually genuinely think that Ismaila Sarr gives the likes of Bruno Fernandes and Ødegaard a run for their money when you consider the price. And even if you... Let's even say, hypothetically, that Sarr was the same price. The only thing he's missing is penalties and corners. Well, what else is that man missing? He's got the fixtures, he's got the minutes, he's got the data, he's passing the eye test. I really think if you don't have Isak and you don't have Trent, I think both of those are worth owning right now. I would do Saka to Sarr and then buy Isak or Trent with the remaining money. I think that's a great transfer to make. And I'm still tempted, even though I don't need the money, I'm still considering Ismaila Sarr in my team. Really, really like him. I don't think that Mateta is a game breaker, but I also think he's been slightly overlooked because obviously he's not scored that many goals this season and obviously in recent weeks as well. He's only 7.2 million. He's got the same set of fixtures. I do think most weeks he plays 80 plus minutes. We expect him to be on penalties because he took a penalty ahead of Eze earlier this season. When we're looking at what is he missing, well, maybe he's not the best finisher, maybe he's not in the best run of form, but he's got pretty much everything else. So I would actually say, if we exclude Isak and Jackson, who for me are the 2 best forwards to own in FPL, Mateta is top 3 forwards for me to bring in right now, along with Jesus and a couple of others. But yeah, I don't see many forwards that are that much better than Mateta. I guess he's not that cheap, so maybe you go all the way down to someone like a João Pedro, or you go all the way down to like John Duran. Maybe that's where you should go with your money. But I am really, really considering Mateta. And if you were to ask me to make the decision now, and I had to bring in a forward this week, I think I would go for Mateta. I think I really like him. And I know not everyone will agree. I just think he's really, really good. Outside of that, It's just the defense. And I know they've just conceded 5 goals and they looked really defensively frail in this game. But Arsenal also had an extremely good game. The likes of Gabriel Jesus are an incredible run of form. And because they conceded a couple early, they kind of had to go for the game. And I feel like they pushed it a little bit. If they'd have set up defensively for the entire game, there's no way they concede 5 goals. So I feel like it is game state dependent. I think Henderson and Munoz should absolutely be on your radar. Henderson's only 4.4 million. Munoz is still below 5 million. For what he offers is crazy. So Munoz is, in the last 5 game weeks, he's averaged 0.29 XG per 90, which is the second best in the league. He's had 4 big chances, which is the best in the league. And he's had 7 shots in the box, which is the best in the league. So he is, for me, the best defender in terms of attacking threat in the league, even ahead of someone like Gabriel or Trent, because he's got that goal threat. Like Trent's overall data is stronger, but it's so dominated by assists, and you get 6 points for a goal versus 3 for the assist. So you obviously want the defenders that are getting goal-scoring opportunities, and Munoz is just always in the box. Now, he's also served his 5 yellow card suspension as well, so he needs to pick up another 5 yellow cards before he's suspended again. With that fixture run coming up, Munoz is the defender to own in FPL for me below 5 million. So, a lot of people have asked me to build a wildcard draft for this video. I didn't have time to build one. But if you're asking about my ideal defense right now, it is probably Gabriel, Trent, Munoz as the back 3. And then you rotate Munoz with maybe something like a Fulham defender as well. So that would be my first choice back 3. And that's the position that I'm trying to get to myself. Next game. And actually, the next 2 games were both 0-0. So not that much exciting stuff to explain from an FPL perspective. But Everton 0, Chelsea 0. 2 very good defenses here. I think Everton, in particular, have been so consistently strong now for a few seasons. How does Deitch find a way to 0-0 such great opposition? He just does it on a consistent basis. He's so good at it. And Everton are now 6th for expected goals conceded this season. They are just a really top defence, and they will continue to be a top defence. And therefore, if you have an attacker playing against Everton, you don't captain them, and you don't necessarily expect that much. It's one of the things putting me off Phil Foden. Even if he starts, I don't expect City to score many goals against Everton. That isn't to say that it can't happen. United scored 4 goals against them, but I feel like that is quite a rare occurrence. Chelsea, though, for me, are the most underrated defense in the Premier League in terms of amongst the FPL community. Everyone hates them because they are very prone to individual errors. The likes of Sanchez, the likes of Disasi, Badiashile, these are players that just for some reason always make individual errors. But as a defense, they actually don't give up many opportunities. Their open play XG conceded is one of the lowest in the Premier League. I just think they're really solid. And obviously, Sanchez getting a 9-pointer is wonderful. I don't expect him to do that every week, but I do think that the likes of Colwill and Sanchez are still really decent players to own. The big concern with Chelsea is last time there was a midweek Premier League game, remember it was against Southampton, we had a benching for Sanchez, Colwill and Jackson, amongst some other players as well. Now, slightly different because there's a slightly bigger break now between the 2 games than there was in the previous midweek. However, and I guess it is Fulham as well. Like, Fulham aren't Southampton. Maybe they took advantage of the fact that they expected to beat Southampton comfortably anyway, which they did. Fulham are a very different opposition. So do I expect there to be rotation against Fulham more so than we've seen in previous games for Chelsea? I absolutely do. There's a very good chance that Sanchez doesn't start and Jorgensen starts. There's a very good chance that Jackson is on the bench and Nkunku starts. But I also wouldn't be surprised if he goes a little bit stronger. If he maybe still keeps Sanchez in goal, or maybe still starts Jackson and brings Jackson off around the 60th minute, but there is definitely going to be reduced minutes. Remember, Palmer and Enzo both started in the previous midweek game? I am a little bit worried about Enzo. Maybe I shouldn't be, because he's played 90 minutes for 6 games in a row now, I believe. But I don't know, like, this is a decent game to do it because it's a midweek fixture. Like, if you are going to rest them, now's the time. I think Cole Palmer is the only one I would feel pretty safe with because he's not played any midweek football to this point. So he shouldn't be tired. And the Premier League is incredibly important to Maresca. It's not the Europa Conference League. So, yeah, I don't know how to feel. I'd love to know what you think down below in the comments. Do you think there will be rotation once again? Or do you think it was largely because it was Southampton last time? On Nicholas Jackson, I still think he's such a good asset to own. He got 2 big chances once again. He's now missed 3 big chances in 2 weeks. That's not ideal. So from the first perspective is, at the start of the season, he wasn't missing as many big chances. He looked a lot more clinical, prolific. In the last few weeks, he started to spur some big chances like he did in his first season when a lot of people were criticizing him because he wasn't a very good finisher. Will that continue? I don't know. And there is a lot to worry about with Nicholas Jackson, right? He's on 4 yellow cards. So if he gets booked in either of the next 2 games, he's suspended for 1 game. Nkunku could start this game, and even when he starts, his minutes aren't great. Isak often gets 90 minutes. I know he's been subbed early in the last two, but they were 4-0 up in both of them. Isak's minutes are a lot better in terms of he's played 90 minutes like 8 or 9 times this season. Nicholas Jackson very rarely does. And he's not on penalties as well. So do I think Jackson is the second best forward in FPL? Yes. But not on pens, risk of suspension, risk of midweek benching. I'm starting to think more and more that I don't need to desperately go out and buy Jackson right now. In a couple of weeks, I might still do so. But I don't feel that desperate need. I don't feel like he's that much of a standout that if you already own Isak, it's like, well, you obviously buy Jackson. But I do still really like him nevertheless. On Enzo was man of the match in this game in terms of overall ratings. And I think he had a very good game. He was a lot deeper than we would want, right? I only watched the highlights for this game. Didn't look particularly exciting, I'll be entirely honest. But I saw a lot of the good work that he was doing was a little bit deeper. The reason for that, no Cucurella, who can sometimes invert, but interestingly as well, Lavia is still out injured. So I feel like with Lavia out injured, Enzo kind of has to just sit a little bit deeper because Gusto or Cucurella, they're not as good at inverting as a midfielder. So what we really want is Lavia to start, Caicedo to start at right back, Caicedo to invert with Lavia, and then that obviously frees up Enzo to play very attacking. So maybe until Lavia is back, Enzo isn't quite as good. But I say that in about the 86th minute, he sprinted through on goal. He gave the ball to Sancho, who should have really taken a shot. And obviously Sancho ran away from the goal. It was pretty poor, but he does still get forward. He is still on set pieces. He still does create chances, and he can still score goals from outside the box. So I guess basically Enzo is a fine option, but maybe playing a little bit deeper than we would want. In terms of Ahmad and Sarr, for me, Ahmad and Sarr are just significantly better. Not significantly, that's a lie. They are marginally better options. Like if I had a fresh choice this week, let's say I were on a wild card, I would pick Ahmad and Sarr ahead of Enzo. Like 10 times out of 10. I've actually built a wild card draft on my YouTube channel very briefly. But yeah, I did have Ahmad and Sarr ahead of Enzo Fernandez. And I think even you could argue that Rodgers isn't a terrible option as well. But I just think that Sarr and Ahmad, what they have is they have that really high upside and that really great goal threat. And with Enzo, can he score goals? Yes. But you're really relying on set piece assists, the odd goal from outside the box. Ahmad and Sarr are playing in like number 10, like out and out number 10 roles where they're in behind the striker. They're getting in behind the defenses. So yeah, I like Enzo. If you've got Enzo, you can keep him. But if you had like unlimited free transfers, I do think Ahmad and Sarr are fantastic. I'll just say very briefly on Everton, another clean sheet. They're now joint top for clean sheets. Ashley Young is now the third top scoring defender in the game with 67 points. Ashley Young, he's got more points than Trent van Dijk, Guardiola, Saliba and Robinson. 7th clean sheet of the season for Everton. And consider how bad they were at the start of the season. It happened the season before. I don't think they kept a clean sheet for the first 7 games, and then they went on a run of keeping like 5 clean sheets in the 7 after that. For some reason, Sean Dyche takes a little while to get going with Everton. But yeah, I mean, and Pickford's just a great goalkeeper as well. He saved a massive chance from Nicholas Jackson. Palmer to Jackson. If that had gone in, we are saying Palmer gets the assist, probable bonus points. Jackson probably comes away with 8 or 9 points, and Everton aren't a brilliant defense anymore. FPL has such fine margins that one goal completely changes the narrative in this game. And I think Chelsea did create enough chances to probably have scored, but Everton had their chances, and Sanchez made a few good saves in there. So I feel like probably a fair result in this game was probably 1-1. They both accumulated about 1 XG. They both had their chances. But yeah, 2 very solid defenses. And not really the same story for the next game because we don't normally have 2 solid defenses. It was Fulham 0, Southampton 0. On Fulham, yeah, they are brilliant defensively. And once again, they were very, very good defensively here. Even with a bit of a sort of a new bounce with Russell Martin no longer there, you might have expected Southampton to score a lot of goals or at least to have more chances. Fulham did largely prevent them from creating too many opportunities. They are now the 7th best defence in the league for expected goals conceded, Fulham. They're actually right there with Chelsea and Everton. So in terms of expected goals conceded, there's less than 0.4 XG separating them. So they are 3 very good defences, Fulham, Everton and Chelsea. But what Fulham have is the fixtures, right? Chelsea have them as well, but Everton don't necessarily. So if I was buying a Fulham or an Everton defender right now, Fulham's fixtures coming up are obviously Chelsea this week, maybe not the best entry point, but then they're going into Bournemouth, Ipswich, West Ham, Leicester, Manchester United. It's a really nice run of fixtures where you can absolutely see some clean sheets for them. So yeah, Fulham defence are certainly worth investing in. If you missed the news last week, Anderson is now back in full team training. He was on the bench for Game Week 17, and you would expect him to therefore, will he go straight back into the 11 for Game Week 18? Maybe not, because Diop and Bassi are doing an absolutely fine job, but you would expect him very soon to be back in the starting 11. But the even bigger news was that Tete, who has started pretty much every game at right back for Fulham this season, he's out for at least 8 to 10 weeks. And then Marco Silva said you also need to take into account the recovery after that. So I reckon Tete could be out until like February, March time. And as a result, Castagna becomes a seriously good option. Now, Castagna and Anderson are both only 4.2 million. So I would argue with Robinson now, I think Robinson's up to 4.9. I would probably want to save the 0.7 million and go for Anderson or Castagna. In terms of who I would prefer to go for, I would prefer Castagna. He's much more attacking than Anderson, and they literally don't have another right back. Now, they might go out in the January transfer window and buy a right back, but I spoke to a couple of Fulham fans. They don't think that will happen because Tete's been really good. Why would you go out and buy a right back that you're only going to need for a couple of months when you've got Castagna there, who, listen, Castagna's clearly not a brilliant right back, but it will absolutely do a job for you. So I think I would, if I was buying a Fulham defender right now, I think my first choice option would be Castagna. Now, if you've already got Robinson, like I bought Robinson last week, he is still brilliant. And if price wasn't a thing, Robinson would be comfortably first choice for me. He was very close to 3 bonus points in this game. Literally 1 or 2 more successful crosses or 1 more interception. He probably would have gone to 3 bonus. He's had 6 assists this season. He had 3 key passes in game week 17. He's played over 3,000 minutes in back-to-back seasons. This season, he has started every single game and played 90 minutes in every single game. So he is one of very few players this season to have already played 1,530 minutes. Robinson is a fitness monster. He's very creative, and he's also an absolutely brilliant footballer, so he's often very good for bonus points. So there is still justification to spend the extra 0.7 on Robinson. I'm not saying that I would definitely go out there and get Castagna, but that 0.7 could go a long way right now. And considering that Castagna is playing the exact same role to Robinson on the other side as part of the same defense, I don't actually mind him. He actually had higher expected assists than Robinson in game week 17. So yeah, I really do like the Fulham defense. If you're looking for a defender this week, I wouldn't mind it. The issue is it's not a good entry point. If you're buying a defender this week, you probably need to start them. If you don't, I'd go for a Fulham defender. If you do, just go for Munoz. He's got Bournemouth away, which isn't great, but I feel like I said, a back 4 with a 5th cheap defender having Trent, Gabriel, Castagna, and Munoz, that's probably the best back 4 you can have right now for me. Elsewhere, the big talking point, Raul Jimenez on the bench. I feel a little bit better about being really hesitant on FPL Therapy last week around Jimenez because I said, time frame wise, it made sense to bench him in the Chelsea game because that was the midweek game. But Jimenez is clearly their first choice forward. And so the best time to bench him was for the Southampton game and to start Muniz because you want Raul Jimenez to start the Chelsea game. He leads the line incredibly well in those tougher games. So we always knew it was a possibility. I still probably would have predicted that he started, but there was enough to put me off. And sadly, he was on the bench. This is kind of worst case scenario because now he's definitely going to start the Chelsea game, or you would expect anyway, which you probably didn't desperately want him for. And then there's the concern that he's benched for the Bournemouth or Ipswich games after that, and you probably would expect him to miss one of those. He might even be benched for the Bournemouth game. He might start midweek and then start Muniz against Southampton and Bournemouth. So there is a concern. And even if he starts Bournemouth, then you might think, oh, might he start Muniz in the Ipswich game? Is he giving Muniz the easier games to try and build his confidence back up? I don't know. So I guess the good thing for Raul Jimenez owners is that Muniz didn't absolutely smash it. It's not like he scored a hat trick, but then also Raul Jimenez off the bench didn't do much either. And he also picked up a booking as well to come away with a big fat 0-pointer. So very disappointing. If I owned Raul Jimenez, I'd probably keep him for now. But if you've got the free transfers again and the money in the bank to move to a Jackson or an Isak, I'd also be very, very happy to sell him. So I really think it depends on your own team and if you have the transfers available to you. Elsewhere, Iwobi had a very quiet game. We did discuss that his underlying data is not very good. He doesn't carry much goal threat, but you expect him to tick along with assists and the odd goal. I still believe that. I still think he'll get attacking returns. But obviously, you wanted him really for that Southampton fixture. So now that he's blanked in that, he doesn't feel as amazing moving forward. But again, if you've got Iwobi in your team, I wouldn't probably be using a transfer right now to take him out. The only other thing was Smith Rowe wasn't even in the squad. He picked up what Marco Silva called a small leg injury. And so I would say Smith Rowe is probably a sell right now. I actually looked into the data for Smith Rowe. He hasn't taken a shot in his last 5 games either. So not only are his minutes really bad, not only is he an injury risk, but he's also not even shooting. So for me, Smith Rowe is absolutely a sell. Even with the fixtures coming up, just get Smith Rowe to Sarr. You literally have the best straightforward transfer you could possibly have doing Smith Rowe to Sarr. Get it done and enjoy the points. So yeah, 2-0 back to back. Another clean sheet in this next game, Leicester 0, Wolves 3. Wolves definitely looked better under Vitor Pereira in this game. I do think it maybe slightly flatters them, the scoreline, especially at the start of the game. Leicester had their chances. Leicester are really struggling defensively under Ruud van Nistelrooy. So I'm going to read out some stats for you. In the last 4 games since Ruud van Nistelrooy took over, Leicester have conceded a league-topping 82 shots, 57 shots in the box, 32 shots on target, and all of those are the worst in the league. So right now, under Ruud, maybe it will start to improve. They are the worst defense in the league. So this is the fixture to target. And Wolves absolutely tore them apart throughout this game. Cunha was exceptional once again. He had 3 key passes. He created 3 chances, one of them being a big chance. He obviously took his goal very well. He really probably should have had at least an assist to go with the goal. And once again, he gets 3 bonus points. So to put into perspective how insane this is, Cunha got 1 goal. And yes, he played well. Obviously, that's why he got bonus points. But just the 1 goal. Gonzalo Guedes got a goal and an assist. We had Doherty and Semedo that got a clean sheet and an assist. So the clean sheet points for the bonus and also the assist. And then we also had Jose Sarr who got the clean sheet and 4 saves. Cunha had more bonus points than all of those. It shows how good he is for bonus. He was on something like 43 in the bonus point system, which is extremely, extremely high. I love Cunha as an asset. So now it comes to the point of the pod where I have to say if, but, maybe when. I don't, at the time of recording this, know whether Cunha will be banned for Boxing Day. I have heard rumours that there is a hearing today, of the day we're recording this, which is Monday. If the hearing is over quickly and it's very clear he's going to be banned, they probably could implement a ban for the Boxing Day game for Cunha. But equally, it is Monday the 23rd of December, and then it's Christmas Eve, then it's Christmas Day. How many people are working at the FA right now? And how many people are wanting to go through the process of implementing the ban and getting that sorted? All of the paperwork, what I'm sure goes with it. I wouldn't be surprised if this is dealt with after Christmas. So I think there is probably a 50-50 chance right now that Cunha's available. I'm very sorry if at the time of you listening or watching, you already know. If Cunha's available, you absolutely keep Cunha. He's got a Manchester United team that have just conceded 3 goals to Bournemouth, as we'll discuss very sadly in a second. They conceded 4 to Spurs. They're clearly still struggling a little bit under Amorim. I say struggling a little bit. They're probably struggling a lot under Amorim. Also, it's at home, and Cunha takes most set pieces for Wolves, and Manchester United conceded yet again another goal from a set piece against Bournemouth. So, if Cunha's available for that game, I think you absolutely keep him and start him. If he isn't, well, then you go to Isak, right? Hopefully, you've got that option available. If you don't, you go to Jackson probably. And if you can't get Jackson or you don't want Jackson, I think there are various options, right? Gabriel Jesus, we spoke about. You could still move to Chris Wood. You could go for Mateta. You could go all the way down to someone like John Duran. There are multiple options, but for me, Cunha's better than most of those. So yeah, I'm basically of the opinion, if Cunha's available, I'll keep him. If he's not available, I'll probably sell him. And we'll discuss when we look at my team at the end, who is most likely to come in for Cunha. Strand Larsen's a sell. The fixtures aren't really there to attack for Strand Larsen. He's very rarely involved in their attacks massively. I know he's got some returns in recent weeks, but for me, Strand Larsen, like the fact that he didn't get anything in a 3-0 win, it just sums him up as an asset. And with the fixtures being as rough as they are, I just don't think you want to keep Strand Larsen long term. So if you have the opportunity this week to move Strand Larsen out, I wouldn't mind it. The only other thing I wanted to say on Leicester Wolves, well, specifically Wolves, apparently in training, Ait-Nouri has been playing as a winger. So apparently only on a couple of occasions, he's actually lined up as a wing back. So it's looking like Ait-Nouri might be utilised as part of a front 3 for Wolves, which is basically like a number 10 role. So Ait-Nouri could be insane value in some of the upcoming weeks, but the fixtures aren't really there. And we also don't know with Ait-Nouri, if he starts as one of the front 3, well, he's probably going to rotate with Gonzalo Guedes as an option, or Sarabia. So maybe him starting as part of the front 3 reduces his minutes, and therefore it might not make him an option. He's also still on 4 yellow cards, because it obviously became a red card in the previous week. He's still on that tightrope suspension, the suspension tightrope, I should say. So yeah, I wouldn't buy Ait-Nouri right now, but just keep an eye on it if he does start as part of that front 3. Right, we've got 2 games left then. So Manchester United, Bournemouth. Obviously, Man United 0, Bournemouth 3. Honestly, Man United were really poor in this, but Bournemouth were also excellent. 4.3 million Howson gets another attacking return. This guy is monstrous from set pieces, by the way. He's already had like 5 or 6 big chances this season. He's not even played that many minutes. He is just really good in the air. The header, by the way, if you've not watched the highlights, go and watch Howson's header. It wasn't like a little tap in from a few yards. It was a brilliant glancing header. So yeah, for me, Howson is arguably one of the best cheap defenders to own. 4.3 million. When I think about defenders that you can own at under the price of 4.5, Anderson and Castagna at 4.2, Chalobah, I should have said, by the way, Chalobah was actually benched for Crystal Palace at 4.4. So he's probably not an option right now because you don't know if he's going to start every game. So it probably is Howson or Castagna or Anderson if you're looking at that cheap price. And if he rotates well with your existing defenders, Bournemouth do keep clean sheets, and they've actually been really decent defensively. They're sort of mid-table defence. So there'll be clean sheets. He's got that attacking threat. I really don't mind him. Semenyo obviously finally got his return. I still wouldn't be going out and buying Semenyo, but this does show maybe that it's not worth trying to move around those cheap midfielders in our teams. Maybe you just keep the one that you've got and just hope they tick along. Rodgers and Semenyo returning when they were two of the most sold assets this week. I actually was really impressed by Cliver overall in this game. I thought that he found some really good pockets. And I think it's a very similar role to what Cunha operates. It's why, again, I think Cunha could do really well. Cliver was sort of, picking the pocket between the defence and the midfield. And he obviously won the penalty and converted the penalty very well. Maybe Cliver is an option because of the penalties, but Bournemouth have already had 6 penalties this season. They are not going to continue at a rate. That would put them on something like 13 or 14 penalties if they continue at this current rate, which I just can't see. So, you've probably missed most of the penalties that Bournemouth will get this season, but Clivert does continue to offer decent value. Again, Manchester United in this game, we were really poor. I will admit that. We didn't deserve to win this game, but we did also create enough chances to win the game. So if you're not looking at XG, you're not looking at chances created, our overall play was really sloppy. We gave away the ball too much. We didn't defend well. But we did create 2.26 XG in this game, and Bournemouth only created from open play, if you ignore the penalty. Well, actually, it's probably less than that. I mean, ignoring the penalty, it was 0.54 XG, but also I've just thought it was the set piece for Howson. They've probably accumulated less than 0.5 XG open play. So I guess what I'm saying is, firstly, Man United are terrible from set pieces, but also I do think there are signs of improvement under Amorim, which people will laugh at. If you're not a Man United fan, you'll probably crack up at the idea that Man United are improving when they've just been beat 4-3 by Spurs and 3-0 by Bournemouth. But I do think there are signs of it. So I don't think Man United are as bad as the league position suggests, but we are a mid-table side at the moment. I think I'm happy to admit that. Bournemouth just look like a better team. I think Brighton are, when they're playing well, a better team than Man United. Spurs are a better team. Chelsea are a better team. Arsenal, Liverpool, City probably are eventually. I think United, there are probably 8 to 10 teams that are just better than Manchester United. And I think that's something that we've got to accept, that United aren't a top 6 team. So when you're investing in their assets, you are going to have to accept that Manchester United will have games where they lose 3-0. Liverpool won't have games where they lose 3-0, which is why you feel more comfortable investing in their assets. So with Bruno and Ahmad, if you're not willing to accept that there will be games when Manchester United absolutely stink, maybe you don't invest in them. But I think Bruno and Ahmad at their price points offer a lot of good value. In this game, Bruno Fernandes actually had the joint highest number of shots in Game Week 17. He had 7 shots overall. That's the same number as Salah and Diaz in that 6-3 victory. So Bruno had the chances. 2 of those were in the box. 1 of them was a big chance. And overall, you probably would expect him to have taken one of those. So I view that as a positive. He was getting into some really advanced positions. And I think Bruno Fernandes in this number 10 role is a seriously good FP option because he's not dropping as deep. He's not coming in to try and play those spraying passes. He is staying in an advanced role where he can pick up the ball, play some neat passes around the edge of the box, and get goal-scoring opportunities himself. Also, he's on penalties. He gets good minutes. Like, Bruno Fernandes is still a really good option. Also, this is looking so far in advance here, but this is what we do in FPL, and this is what we do in FPL Therapy. Game week 29 looks like it's going to be a blank game week for the likes of potentially Arsenal, Chelsea, Spurs. So it could be there's a massive blank in 29, and you might play the free hit in that week, but there will be other weeks where you might want to free hit. And in game week 29, Manchester United play against Leicester. So I'm looking right now like 12 game weeks in the future. But if you can keep your Man United assets that long, they might serve you really well for game week 29 too. So I do still really like Bruno. I suppose the concern with Bruno, is he 3 million better than Ahmad? Over 3 million, probably better than Ahmad right now, based on the prices. I think he's 3.1, 3.2 million better. Probably not, right? If you're looking at actual value per price, Ahmad probably does more for you, and he frees up a lot of funds. So if I just look in isolation, I'd probably say save the money and go for Ahmad. But what do I like about Bruno? I still think his minutes are more secure than Ahmad. I love the penalties. And for me, myself, I've already got Isak, I've already got Palmer, I've already got Salah, I've already got Trent, and I've already got Gabriel. So what am I freeing up funds for right now? I don't want Haaland. I don't think I'm going to bring in Jackson right now. And even if I did, I wouldn't have to go to Ahmad to afford it. What am I freeing up by going for Ahmad? And if I genuinely think I don't need that 3 million right now, well then why don't I just go for Fernandes? Because some people will need that money. So it's almost like a little bit of a differential play as well. Everyone else would be downgrading to Ahmad to get Isak and Trent, and I don't have to do that because my team is quite well set up. So I think I marginally prefer Bruno to Ahmad right now. But if you need the funds, like I say, if you're sat there without Isak, go for Ahmad or Sarr ahead of Bruno. Absolutely. I don't mind that at all. So yeah, I think that Manchester United options are still there, but it was not a good performance. And I am happy to sit here and admit it. So the final game before we then take a look at my differentials and also my team for game week 18, it was Spurs 3, Liverpool 6. I watched the entire game. I really haven't enjoyed a game of football that much in a long time. And obviously I say that as someone that owns and captains Salah, but it was just an incredible game of football, back and forth. 9 goals in that game is insane. Just some stats for you. Liverpool had 5.22 XG in this game, and they had 18 shots in the box and 11 big chances. How insane. 11 big chances. The next closest was Newcastle with 13 shots in the box and 6 big chances, which is, it's just mind-boggling. I can't wrap my head around 11 big chances in a single game. Mohamed Salah is truly ridiculous. So the best ever season by any player in FPL was Salah with 303 points. So he's the only player to have ever actually crossed 300 points. He's currently on track to get 420 points in FPL, averaging over 11 points per game week. He has 26 attacking returns already in the Premier League, which includes 11 double-digit hauls in 16 games. And he now faces the worst defence in the league over the past 4 games in Leicester at home, who have just shipped 7 goals to Newcastle and Wolves in the past 2 weeks. He is comfortably the best asset in FPL. He's remarkable, and he's going into one of the best fixtures that you could possibly want. If we think that Salah's going to start, because it is an option to rest him, but I don't think he will. If we think Salah starts, I think Salah is a serious triple captaincy option. I'd love to know if you agree with that, but if I still had the chip and I wasn't that sure about a future double, I'd be very tempted to play out Mohamed Salah. The only thing worth noting before you commit to that is in game week 24, we are expecting a double game week for Salah of Bournemouth away and Everton away. So what you have to consider yourself is, would you rather Salah against Leicester at home as a single game, or in a double game week with Bournemouth away and Everton away? I would usually back the double game week, right? Because you get the extra appearance points, you get 2 shots here, right? Let's say Salah has a stinking game against Bournemouth. Well, he has a second game against Everton. But we have just said that Everton and Bournemouth are actually pretty good defensively. So I would be super tempted if I still had the triple captaincy, and he is absolutely going to be my captain. Trent also had an exceptionally good game. His creativity was unreal. He created 3 big chances. I think that is probably top 5 performances I've ever seen from Trent in terms of his passing ability. And if you think about some of the games we've seen from Trent in the past, I can't think of a single cross that he misplaced. He could have really come away with multiple attacking returns in this game. I also thought 2 things. He was playing a lot further forward than we've seen in recent weeks. That might have been specific to Spurs because they are so vulnerable. But he was getting forward a hell of a lot. And Gomez was covering right back a lot of the time. And I also thought he looked a lot fitter. He's running. He looked like he was sprinting more. Like in previous games, he's been sat there a little bit deeper, not doing too much running. He looked a little bit more like the Trent of old. But again, that might have been game state dependent. As long as he starts against Leicester, which there is some question marks as to whether he will, because he has just come back from injuries, played a lot of minutes, I think he is just so fantastic for that Boxing Day game. So I'm very happy to own Trent. All I would say, Liverpool have actually conceded a lot of goals recently. They've conceded 8 goals in the last 3 games. So they conceded 3 against Newcastle, 2 against Fulham. I am very aware there was 10 men, but they also conceded a goal before the sending off, and 3 against Spurs. So yes, there's some game state stuff there to consider, but they aren't as good as Arsenal defensively for me, Liverpool. They are the second best defense in the league, yes, but they won't keep as many clean sheets as Arsenal, which is why I think Trent is better than Van Dijk, because with Van Dijk, you really need the clean sheets. With Trent, we've seen that you can go out there and get a couple of assists in a single game. So yeah, I really like Trent. If I was to list the best defenders to own in FPL right now, Gabriel, Trent, Timber, Van Dijk, I would probably go for double Arsenal defense still ahead of double Liverpool. But the fixtures aren't necessarily massively there for Arsenal either. But I think Gabriel and Trent are the best 2 defenders in FPL. Szoboszlai was probably my man of the match. He didn't get the credit from, I think it was Gary on comms, wasn't it? Gary was choosing between Luis Diaz and Salah as the man of the match. Szoboszlai was sensational in that number 10 role. The ability for him to drive with the ball, with the energy that he has, it was the perfect game for him. He had 3 assists and 1 goal. If he was more nailed, I'd be talking about Szoboszlai as an option. But since game week 7, he's been benched on 4 occasions. He's just not nailed on to start every game. I think he starts more games than he's benched. But if he's taken up a really valuable Liverpool slot, You really need him to start pretty much every game. And especially going into that double game week, which we're expecting to be in game week 24, you don't really want to take up a Liverpool position on a player that's not going to start both of them. So I really like Szoboszlai, but the minutes are just a slight concern. Luis Diaz is probably the most interesting Liverpool attacker for me outside of Salah. But once again, he doesn't start every game. It's often sort of bench, start, bench, start. There was 6 consecutive games where he had a pattern of bench, start, bench, start, bench, start. He has started the last 2 Premier League games, but does he start Boxing Day? He played a fair amount of minutes and did a lot of running against Spurs. Is this not a really good game to just start Darwin and Jota? Or Darwin and Gakpo? Or Gakpo and Jota? Do you need to start Luis Diaz in this game? You absolutely don't. So I think for that reason, I wouldn't be surprised if he's on the bench. But at the same time, you're not bringing him in for 1 fixture. Do I think there's a chance Diaz starts 4 of the next 5? Yeah, maybe. But he could also start 3. This is what puts me off of the Liverpool mids. I'm just not confident in predicting their minutes. And the same on Jota. Jota come off the bench, got 22 minutes. You might say, that's great. He's got 11 minutes. He's got 22 minutes. He's going to start and get 60 to 70. Who's to say he doesn't get 30? When Jota came off the bench, I was like, right, here we go. Show me something, Diogo. Show me something that makes me want to own you. I don't think he looked that good. Diaz looked much, much better. And I don't know that he looks fully fit. So I wouldn't be surprised if Jota gets 60, yes. But I also wouldn't be surprised if he gets 20 or 30 once again. And if he does get 60, there is no way he starts in game week 19 for me. So you're bringing in an asset that might start, might not, and then probably definitely doesn't start the one after that. I just can't get on board with the Jota punt. I'm really sorry because I know a lot of people want to go there. It's just not for me. But if we do get a leak that he's likely to start or you want to take the risk, I guess I don't hate it. Just very briefly on Spurs, Solanke is definitely starting to get more goal-scoring opportunities. He obviously got a goal and assist, I think, against Manchester United. Maybe 2 goals. I've sort of wiped that game from my memory. In this one, he obviously got the goal and the assist. The issue with Solanke is, like I said, he's terrible for bonus points. 3 bonus points this season from 11 attacking returns. That's crazy. Like, how is he not picking up more bonus points? And he's not on penalties. The minutes are very good. The fixtures are a bit of a mixed bag. I don't love the next 3. And like I said, Forest are a really good defense. It's not the best entry point for Dominic Solanke. So I think for that reason, I'm probably not massively considering. But if I own Solanke, would I have any issue keeping him? I mean, if you've held him to this point, honestly, no. The Liverpool fixture was one of the toughest you'd get, and he comes away with 9 points. So yeah, I've got no issue keeping him, but I probably wouldn't look out to go and buy him. Really, the player that we should be considering is probably James Maddison. He's up to 13 attacking returns in 14 starts. But the minutes are such an issue. He's averaging like 50 minutes over the last 7 or 8 games. Once again, he's hooked in the 57th minute against Liverpool. So even after what looked like a brilliant performance, he's just not getting the minutes, sadly. So for me, I can't bring in an asset that is averaging 50 to 60 minutes. Even with 13 attacking returns, I am always going to favour the players. Like, if it's for me between Maddison, Jota, Ødegaard or Bruno, it's not a consideration for me. Not only are Ødegaard and Bruno on penalties, but the minutes are also so much better. So that's why I always come back to those more nailed assets. I know a lot of people will be looking at Heung-min Son. He's obviously a major minutes risk is the only concern. Since game week 10, he's averaging 68 minutes per game. The thing is with Son, he's just not the talisman anymore. And talismanic theory, it doesn't matter that much, I suppose, but you want to own the player from the team that's the one that's driving the team. If a goal pops up, I don't even expect it to be Son half the time. And yes, he's actually got a fair amount of attacking returns this season, but with the minutes that he's getting, with the chance of a benching, which never used to happen with Son, I'm just not as sure. Now, he is on penalties. He does have a very high ceiling. What did he get? Like 14 or 15 points in one half 2 game weeks ago. So he has that ceiling. I don't want to put you off Son, but for me to pay 9.8 million for an asset, I really think I need to see a bit more from them. So yeah, that's it. That's all of the games reviewed. Just very briefly, people did want me to discuss Saka replacements. I have really discussed all of these assets already, but to go through them, at the cheaper price, you've got 4 options to replace Saka. Murphy, Sarr, Ahmad, Enzo. For me, it would only be those 4. I would only go for Murphy if you really need the funds. Like, you can't afford Sarr, Ahmad, or Enzo. Because for me, the other 3 stand out. It's just the minutes for me. That's the only thing with Murphy. If you told me he starts every game, I would consider him a lot higher. But because he doesn't, I'm a little bit more hesitant. I think Sarr, Ahmad, and Enzo all have really good minutes. Arguably, Sarr might have the best of the bunch, though. In the way that he's playing, you can't really bench him. Like, the step down to Kamara and Nketiah is just massive. And what does Sarr have? Goal threat, fixtures, form, minutes. Like I said, the only thing he's missing is penalties and corners. So for me, Sarr is the best. Then I would go for Ahmad, then Enzo, then Murphy. So if you need to get that cheap price, hopefully that helps. There's then a bit of a step up, obviously. You've got those more mid-price players. So I guess you can put Martinelli, Gordon, Jota, Diaz amongst those sort of more sort of mid-price players. Do any of them stand out as being that much better than someone like Ismaila Sarr? Not overly. I do really like Gordon. I think the minutes will be good. He's got a lot to like about him. Jota, Diaz, the minutes are a bit of a risk. Martinelli is probably the one. I think if I was going to go at that sort of in-between price between the Brunos and Erdegaards down to the sort of Enzos and Amads, maybe Martinelli. Like, he starts most games for Arsenal. With Saka probably being out, you'd imagine that he's going to start even more, maybe get even better minutes. If you remember as well, he's actually had some really good link up with Gabriel Jesus in the past. So maybe Jesus and Martinelli starting together might actually benefit Martinelli. So I don't mind a punt on Martinelli. I probably prefer it to Trossard just because Trossard seems to be slightly lower in the pecking order. But if you can nail the right Arsenal attacker to replace Saka, it could go really well. We then move on to sort of more expensive options. I think for me it is, like I said, Bruno or Erdegaard. And I think it's safety of minutes, penalties, set pieces. The fixtures are pretty decent as well. They are both pretty talismanic for their teams, and you would expect them to get attacking returns when their teams play. So I think for me, it is going to be Bruno or Erdegaard. And at that price, that is the price that I'm probably looking to go to. It probably is Bruno or Erdegaard. The only one that is creeping into my thinking, along with maybe Luis Diaz, is actually Phil Foden. I've loved owning Foden in the past. He finally gets his goal, as I said, in the previous game week. His data's not awful across the season, but in recent weeks, it has been pretty low. And you are really taking a punt that City randomly turn it around. And they haven't done now for 13 games. So this isn't a quick run. We've had 2 or 3 bad games in a row. They've been playing badly since like October. So you have to consider how much you're willing to take that risk. And does Foden start the next 3 games? I just don't know. And he's not on penalties. And he's not on all set pieces. So I don't know that Foden, I expect him to outscore Bruno or Odegaard by that much, or I expect his ceiling to be that much higher. But for some people, it will be a really fun punt going for Foden or KDB. So to recap, if I was to like list all together, taking into account price, I think Bruno and Erdegaard are at the top for me, and then it's Ismaila Sarr. So I'll leave it there as my top 3 Saka replacements. I would love to know, and again, I'm assuming that Saka's out, who are you looking to replace him with in your teams? So as you guys will probably know by now, this episode and this podcast has been sponsored by FPL Therapy, the wonderful free-to-play fantasy football mobile game, which I have been now testing and playing for approaching a year. I'm so heavily involved in the project behind the scenes as well. This is truly something that I believe in. So if you do want to check it out, there'll be a link down below. It's still not quite available in the UK, but trust me, it will be soon. And the plans for 2025 are absolutely insane as well. So yeah, do make sure to check it out. But basically, each week we meet with our agent to basically scout a player and to try and improve our overall club. You can see my club on the screen. I am over my budget at the moment, but it has definitely improved. I've got the likes of Bowen, Gordon, Rice, Erdegaard on loan, Saliba in the team. The team is moving in the right direction, but every week I say I would like a better midfielder. Now, I have just pulled Declan Rice, but it would be really nice, alongside Rice, to have a second really good midfielder that has good upcoming fixtures. So as always, I ask Manny to bring me a midfielder, but he doesn't always do so. So let's wait and see, and we'll meet with Manny now. Oh, God. It always stinks on FPL Therapy. Do you know what? After this, I'll meet with the agent, and he'll pull me like an 86 rated player. It is 79 rated Doucouré. I mean, I'll sign him, but I don't really want him. And no, that doesn't massively upgrade my midfield moving forward. His scores in recent weeks, because he doesn't start, is 1-1, nothing, 5-0. So thanks for nothing, Manny. At least the club is already looking pretty decent for the upcoming weeks. But if you do want to check it out, if you want to build your squad in the future, make sure to click the link down below. Or if you're watching on social media, make sure to click the link in my bio. You can go to club, check it out, and trust me, this is going to be something that you want to get involved in. And yeah, thank you to club for continuing to sponsor the podcast. So the next thing we do for FPL Therapy is a little prediction game. So last week, so to explain it, each week our guest gives us 3 players below 10% that they think will perform well for the upcoming week. You can see on your screen, if you're watching on YouTube, the FPL Therapy leaderboard. And by the way, if you are watching on YouTube, please drop a like and make sure to subscribe. And by the way, if you're listening on audio, maybe jump over to YouTube and subscribe just to support. I would really appreciate it. So at the moment, I'm still top of my own leaderboard with 26 points because I'm absolutely massive. And I'm also joint second on my own leaderboard as well. And that is only when I've done a few solo pods. So basically, I'm absolutely brilliant at this game. No, not really. I've just had more opportunities to guess than our guests. Gian actually only got 13 points. I actually really liked his picks, but he guessed Kudus, Iwobi, and Højlund last week. Kudus obviously got the 9-pointer. Iwobi very sadly blanked, and Højlund was actually on the bench. So that puts him in joint 7th with me when I had another solo pod. So not the best effort here. I would really like to lock up the top 3 spots in my own in my own game on my own podcast. So here are the 3 players that I'm selecting below 10% that I expect to do well for the upcoming game week. And I'm going to start with someone that I'm shocked that he's below 10%, which is Jarrod Bowen. It really is the last week that we're expecting Jarrod Bowen to do anything, but he's playing against Southampton. It's a great fixture for him. Southampton is still one of the worst defenses in the league. I know they've just kept a clean sheet, but I don't think that will continue on a consistent basis. Yeah, Jarrod Bowen at 7%, it feels like a great matchup for him, whether he's playing as the 9 or off the right. I expect him to do really well. For the other 2 picks, I initially had Luis Diaz and Diogo Jota. I was going to go double up on Liverpool and really attack that fixture. I don't know if either of them start. I could see a situation where it's Jota and Darwin with Salah. So I don't feel comfortable picking any Liverpool players. I've fully bottled it on the prediction game in not choosing a Liverpool asset. So I'm going to go with Odegaard and Martinelli instead. I'll flash them both up on your screen. I just think having the 2 Arsenal players in there, you'd expect them both to start, and I'm sort of hedging my bets a little bit. I've not gone for Gabriel Jesus, just because I feel like he's got a lot of goals recently. You know, these 2 are maybe the ones that are due that big score that he's just recently got. And also midfielders get the extra point for a clean sheet and the extra point for a goal. So I always feel like midfielders have a slightly higher ceiling, which is why I've chosen 3 of them here. And I do think that both Martinelli and Odegaard could do really well in this game. So those are my 3 differentials: Bowen, Odegaard, Martinelli. Let me know in the comments who your 3 differentials are. So just to finish up then, we have my Game Week 18 team. So I'll put it on your screen if you are on YouTube. If you're listening on audio, the team is currently Sanchez in goal against Fulham at home, but I have Fabianski against Southampton away on the bench. I would love to know, who would you start between Sanchez and Fabianski? At the moment, I am leaning towards Sanchez because he's playing for the better defence, but Fabianski definitely has the better fixture. I have a feeling that Sanchez might be benched anyway because it's a midweek game, so I might have the decision made for me. But in case I don't, let me know. The back 3 at the moment is Trent against Leicester at home, Rico Lewis against Everton at home, and Gabriel against Ipswich at home. If Rico Lewis, I find out that he's not starting, I've only got Robinson on the bench, so I may well end up selling Lewis for Munoz, but that will depend what other moves I make. If I've already made a couple of moves, maybe I don't take a hit and maybe I just start Robinson instead. The midfield 4 looks okay, although we, of course, do have the Saka injury to deal with. So Enzo and Palmer playing against Fulham. Not expecting that much, but hopeful I might get a couple of returns. And then Salah, obviously, with the armband against Leicester at home. And then Saka currently injured in my 11. I do have Rodgers on the bench against Newcastle away. Part of me is tempted to start Rodgers instead of Enzo, but equally, I don't know if that's just a little bit of recency bias. Like, they're both decent defenses in Fulham and Newcastle. If I expect a team to score more goals, it's usually Chelsea than Aston Villa. So I'm starting Enzo at the moment, but there is part of me that does want to give Rodgers the start. And then my front 3 is Isak against Aston Villa at home, Cunha against United at home, and João Pedro against Brentford at home. Obviously, if Cunha's not banned, then I'll just stick with this front 3. I think it looks absolutely fine, all with home fixtures, and all of them being penalty takers. So, in terms of my transfers, like I said, 2 free transfers, 1 million in the bank. I am looking at doing Saka to Bruno or Odegaard. So that is a likely transfer for me in my team. The only other thing that I could see myself doing is just going all the way down to Ismail Assar. But like I said, what am I freeing up funds for? I've got a Liverpool defender. I've got an Arsenal defender. I've got Isak. I don't really have an easy route to Jackson in terms of I have 3 Chelsea. But if I didn't, well, I could just do Cunha to Jackson anyway. There is no one that I am freeing up money for right now. And even like Son and Haaland, like the more expensive players, I don't desperately want to own them. So yeah, in my team, I don't feel the need to free up the funds. So I think I'm going to probably go Bruno Fernandes. There is a possibility that I go Odegaard if I want an Arsenal attacker. But if I was to say right this second what I'm leaning towards, it's Bruno Fernandes, which would then leave me with 1 transfer and 3 million in the bank, or 2.9 million in the bank. So with that remaining money, I could sell Rico Lewis for Munoz this week. But if Rico Lewis starts, I kind of back the chance of a clean sheet slightly more than for Munoz, considering how blunt Everton have been. And then the other option is I sell Cunha. So as of right now, if Cunha was banned and I needed to replace him, I'm looking at Mateta or Jesus. Nicholas Jackson might be the standout option, but as I said, there are issues associated with him, and I would have to take a -4 to sell Sanchez or Enzo because I already own 3 Chelsea players. So right now, it's probably Jesus or Mateta. If I go Bruno, I am tempted to go Jesus, just because it still gives me a route into the Arsenal attack. But I feel like Mateta might be the safer long-term option, and he's on penalties. So I like penalty takers, as you can probably tell. I like the safety of minutes, and I like the fixtures coming up for Crystal Palace. So yeah, basically, Saka to Bruno very likely, and then if Cunha's banned, it'll be him to Jesus or Mateta. But other than that, I think the team's looking pretty good. So, guys, there we have it. That is the Game Week 18 podcast. Hopefully, you have enjoyed. And if you have and you're watching on YouTube, please do smash that like button and make sure to subscribe as well. If you're listening on audio, please do make sure to rate us 5-star. I would massively appreciate it. But until next time, have a wonderful Christmas and a very happy New Year. Thank you very much. Bye bye.